Joining us first to discuss this topic, we have Himanshu Bhatt, who is a senior journalist joining us from Gujarat. Himanshu, thank you very much for being here. We're looking at an ever-evolving situation, but one that is seeing the M23 and Rwandan-backed M23 rebels continuing their move in Congo. There is some talk and some unity within Africa, but what more do you think needs to be done to halt this and bring a ceasefire, which will also end what we're seeing, which is killings and potential murders of children, among others?
Right. Everything needs to be done, but whether it is being done or not is a question. It might have been done on the paper, but it doesn't translate it on the ground. See, the situation here in a place like DRC, Congo, what you have is a fight for, there's a two-way fight that's going on. One is the local tribesmen, they are fighting. The local tribes, or the local communities, the way we put it here in India, they are fighting. Another thing is, the bigger powers are fighting for the 25 trillion rare earth minerals. And they keep on, flagging things. On one side, you have a French influence. On the other side, you have, Chinese influence, because China purchases about 70% of the cobalt that DRC produces. So, what happens behind the scenes, it's very, very difficult to predict. Sitting here in Asia and talking about Africa at times becomes very difficult. The reason only for that is some powers have a vested interest along with the tribe's interest. Now here we are talking of, a rebel group taking over something. But what will you do with these Rwandan armies? When they support someone, they get into DRCs. And then people and children, see the actual casualty is the women and the children. In any sort of a conflict zone, the maximum number of people that suffer the most are the women and children. And here also it's the same thing happening. And especially when you talk of sub-Saharan and African countries, where the poverty is to be seen and to be believed, the human rights don't exist. Because when you are not talking of 2 square meals a day, a proper health, forget about health, when we are not talking of 2 square meals a day, what are we talking about human rights and what needs to be done? Can UN do something? Well, if it got the guts and the gumption, it can do, but it will not do. Because it has a French influence. The French is a waning power today in the world. How much of a say France has in the UN? In the world forums, how much of voice does France have? What can it do for Democratic Republic of Congo? That's my basic question, sitting outside of Congo. And when we are talking of human rights for the people and the children of Congo, who are getting massacred, who are getting butchered, well, what will you find there? You will find all plans taking place on paper, nothing executed on the ground, and the ground fighting will go on. The rebels and the army will keep on fighting.
Yes,
we'll talk about a day. The next day we'll forget about it. Unfortunately, that's the realistic situation there. And it's all a fight for that, rare earth minerals of 25 trillion. Congo is a very rich country in that sense. But today, if you see their per capita income is what, $712? It's way, way, way below poverty line. That is the basic cause, and that needs to be alleviated.
Yes. Yes, I'd like to bring it back to the military action, and we have, of course, Major General A.K. Sawatch with us, who is a defence expert. Thank you very much, Major General, for being here. I want to look at the fighting and the military aspect of this. We have, of course, the Democratic Republic of Congo army, but we also have Rwandan-backed rebels. But then there are also militias that are fighting within the region as well. And recently, within the last couple of days, there's been infighting between the Democratic Republic of Congo's forces and their allied militias. So it feels that at this point, the fighting isn't necessarily one-on-one. It seems that there's fighting breaking out everywhere. And how do global leaders look at this and try and maintain this when it seems that there's a chaotic aspect to the fighting?
You know, the problem in African countries are that they are very rich in the resources, but otherwise they are very poor, and there are a number of factions which are working, and they are fighting against each other. And the problem is that they were mainly ruled by the Europeans once upon a time. Now, mostly the Europeans have gone out, but they still control their resources. And therefore, to get hold of these resources, there is always an infighting going on. You find small forces which are fighting with each other. And at the same time, countries like China and Russia are now trying to build inroads in these areas so that they can gain and exploit the resources here. As far as the Democratic Republic of Congo is concerned, they have a problem in the eastern portion, and where the Rwanda-backed M23, they are the one which are basically operating, and they are the one which are fighting against the DRC army, the Democratic Republic Congo army. To help them, the Burundian army had initially come there basically to fight against their own rebels which were operating from the eastern portion of Congo. But now they are helping out DRC to fight against M23, which is being backed by Rwanda. Now the problem comes is that Rwanda is spending a lot of money and they are getting funds from outside agency, and they are giving fund to M23. M23 is a very potent, you can say, extremist group, and of late it has managed to capture Goma, and now also they have the South Kivu and Bukavu. So therefore, it looks like that the eastern portion of DRC is very vulnerable to this M23 backed by the Rwandan. And there was some rumors which were there that basically the Burundi army, which was fighting in DRC, has now going back after there were allegations which were there against M23 that they have executed certain children below 15 years also. But that has been now been ruled out, and the Burundi spokesman has said very clearly that the Burundi army will stay there in DRC and they will fight against M23, which is backed by Rwanda. So I suppose the situation is, you can say, is going in a manner that once it looks like the rebels have got a stronghold, and at the same time it looks like the DRC army, along with the support of basically Burundi army, is having an upper hand. So one can't be very clear, but what has happened is the situation in DRC, the eastern portion especially, is very, very fragile. You find human rights violation taking place. People are very poor. The resources can be exploited by the foreign countries. And all these countries in African continent, they are fighting against each other. And they are made to fight. And you find in each country, there are a number of rebels which are there. There are certain rebels which are fighting against each other, or the main country is fighting against these rebels, which being supported by a country which is a neighboring country. So this is an irony. But to me, it looks like that the good news is the Burundi army is going to stay put in DRC, and they are fighting against basically M23, which is a Rwanda-backed extremist group, along with the DRC. And I suppose that is a good news in the sense, if M23 manage to capture more area of DRC, in the especially of eastern portion, you will find it, the whole area will then become disturbed, and it will then percolate to Burundi also, and the Rwanda will have an upper hand.
Yes, Major General Sawatch, very quickly before we move on, do you think this requires peacekeeping forces from other nations, and if so, where could they come from?
Absolutely. See, there were a United Nations peacekeeping force, but of late they have been not also very successful. But I certainly say that if you want a peace for a long term, you want a United Nations peacekeeping force from places other than African continent. I suppose there are Asian countries like India, you find even Bangladesh, Nepal, they are ready to send their peacekeeper there. I suppose that's a step in a right direction. There were UN peacekeeping force, but the strength has to be increased, and especially the eastern portion, which has now become very vulnerable due to M23 attacking the eastern portion backed by the Rwandan army. There is a requirement of UN peacekeeping force, and which should be of a strength, which should be able to fight against M23 rebels, which are backed by the Rwandan army.
Major General Sawatch and Himanshu, thank you very much for both joining us.